Hello, Andrew here, welcome to my channel on investing. Before 2000, the Federal Reserve used Consumer Price Index or CPI to guide its monetary policy, but since then it switched to Personal Consumption Expenditures or PCE price index. So when the Fed says that it wants the inflation rate to be around 2%, it is the PCE that Jerome Powell means. But what are the differences between CPI and PCE? Is one better than the other? And why the Fed chose to track PCE? These are the questions that I will tackle in this video. Changes in prices or inflation play a crucial role in the economy. Year-end federal tax brackets and Social Security are adjusted for inflation. And depending on what inflation metric you use, even small percentage differences can add up to billions of dollars. While the CPI and PCE track closely each other, divergences happen often. This was especially evident during the COVID-19 outbreak. The difference in June of 2022 was almost 2%, which was very unusual long-term. Overall, we see that the CPI tends to trend at higher rates than the PCE. The mechanics behind calculations for the CPI and PCE are similar. Namely, each index wants to measure changes in consumer prices by looking at prices of a certain basket of products on a monthly basis. For instance, let's suppose a consumer buys 2 apples and 3 oranges each month. The prices in January are $2 per apple and $2 per orange. His total expenditure this month amounts to $10. Let's suppose that prices go up by 50% for apples and 100% for oranges. Keeping quantities constant, the consumer's expenditure this month for this basket will be $18. If we treat the first month as a base for comparison, the inflation rate is 80% or $18 divided by 10. You can see it is somewhere between 50% and 100%, but closer to 100% since the consumer spends more on oranges. What's more, we can normalize everything by the first month expenditures and multiply it by 100 to get the price index. The readings will be 100 and 180 in January and February. And that's pretty much the primer on price indices. If we look closer, we can tell where things can go in different directions. For instance, what if quantities consumed vary depending who you ask? It could be 5 apples, not 2 apples. Also, what if the consumer substitutes more expensive oranges for apples in the next month? Or what if someone subsidizes this consumer's expenditures, like a government for instance? Should we include those subsidies? These different scenarios are exactly what drives differences between the CPI and PCE. The Bureau of Labor Statistics produces the CPI. The Bureau of Economic Analysis constructs the PCE. There are 4 causes behind differences between the CPI and the PCE. These are the following so-called effects, which are formula, scope, weight, and other effects. The formula effect is what it is. The CPI and PCE use different formulas. I'm not going into too much detail on this. If you want to read more, here's what to know. The CPI uses a Les Perez type index formula, while the PCE uses a Fisher ideal index formula. In a nutshell, it's about what quantities, or also called weights, each index applies each month. The CPI keeps quantities constant for 2 years, while the PCE adjusts them monthly. For instance, suppose that oranges become more expensive than apples. Consumers will respond likely by buying more apples and fewer oranges. Because the PCE accounts for this change each month, it will better reflect inflation rates. Conversely, the CPI will overstate the rate of inflation by keeping quantities unchanged for too long. The scope effect arises because the CPI and PCE track different populations of consumers and their expenditures. The PCE index includes both urban and rural consumers. Conversely, the CPI considers only urban ones. Also, the CPI takes into account only out-of-pocket spending that consumers incur, but the PCE considers expenditures made on consumers' behalf too. For instance, you're probably paying for your health insurance premiums, but behind the scenes, your employer also covers part of your insurance premium. The CPI does not include employers' contributions, while the PCE does. The same thing happens when a non-for-profit or a local government government subsidize food and shelter. The weight effect happens due to different weights assigned to various types of expenditures. For instance, the PCE includes healthcare expenses made on behalf of consumers. For this reason, it weighs healthcare more. At the same time, the CPI has a higher weight for housing expenses. Similar weighting differences happen in other categories, as you see here. For example, the housing costs went out of control in the last several years. Therefore, it has been the major contributor for the divergence between the CPI and the PCE. Finally, everything else that is not captured by the above will land in the so-called other effects category. For example, the CPI and PCE, they source their prices differently, so the differences arise. Or, for example, they use different seasonal adjustment methodologies. So again, all this will be captured in this other effects category. Overall, the scope and weight effects, they will produce the biggest differences between CPI and PCE. Given that the Fed uses PCE, does it mean that it is better? The short answer is no. When the Fed switched to PCE, it gave three main reasons. First, it said that PCE better reflects consumer behavior when they substitute expensive goods for cheaper ones. Second, the PCE includes more comprehensive coverage of goods and services. Remember how CPI excludes rural consumers as well as expenditures made on behalf of others. Finally, the historical PCE data can be revised in its entirety if the methodology changes. But conversely, the CPI can be revised only for changes in seasonal factors. Still, the CPI has many advantages as it narrowly targets the inflation that the consumer feel or experience. So in essence, these two price indices, they answer different questions. That's why things such as rent or tax brackets, they are adjusted based on the CPI and not PCE. Moreover, while the Fed targets the PCE, it still takes into account the CPI to get a many-sided view on inflation. That is it for this video. I hope you learned something new today. Please give it a like and subscribe to my channel on more content about investing. Thank you for watching.